The LG C10 and Vizio's brand new OLED TV both have an absolutely great picture, but which one looks better? Hey guys, it's the Villaman here, home theater enthusiast and lover of all things tech, and of all the 2020 model TVs I've reviewed and compared so far, I've had more requests to compare these two than any other, so here we are. Stick around. So if you've never seen one of my comparisons before, then you are in for a treat because I do things a bit differently. Now this will be a direct picture comparison of both TVs on the same vertical plane. So that allows me to do some pretty fancy things which you probably saw a glimpse of in the intro. Now in this video we'll be comparing them with some benchmark test scenes from Spears & Munsell and also using 4K HDR videos. Now both TVs have a 65-inch screen size, but the Vizio will look slightly bigger on camera since it's pulled forward a bit. Now this is just a picture comparison. I'll also be doing a 4K gaming comparison also, so come back for that one. I've also left links to both TVs in the description as well as links to other videos on both TVs. Now throughout the video I'll be highlighting the differences between both TVs, but you'll be able to see a lot of those differences because this video, like all my videos, are in 4K HDR, so you'll be able to see a lot more of the shadow and highlight detail. Now you'll be able to watch it in 4K HDR on your newer iPhone or Android devices or your 4K HDR TVs. Alright, so enough talking, let's get into it. First, we'll test tone mapping by seeing how well the TV differentiates the brightness of each section, and the Vizio is the first TV to suitably differentiate the brightness of each section, from the darkest segments to the brightest segments, unlike the LG which has trouble differentiating between the two brightest segments. Next up is a test of point brightness using bright dots on a dark background, and LCD TVs will typically have a very hard time with this test where the points wouldn't be as bright as they should, but it is not a challenge for an OLED TV. Next up is the star field test, and this test can highlight black crush. This is evident when a TV starts the scene late and ends it early, but in this instance we can see where the faded stars in the background aren't as bright on the LG as they are on the Vizio, which indicates that there is some black crush happening on the C10 which isn't on the Vizio. Blooming will also not be an issue for these TVs since there is no backlight. Next up, we'll test the TV's ability to smooth gradients and reduce banding in an 8-bit and 10-bit video source. And while both TVs have banding present in the 8-bit source, the Vizio does a better job of smoothing out the gradients in the 10-bit source than the C10 does, as the C10 still has some banding evident in the 10-bit source. Next up, we'll test the motion interpolation ability of both TVs by smoothing out a fast-moving image. And as expected, both TVs can make fast-moving content smoother and more legible, but there are motion artifacts as a result, and there are a lot more motion artifacts on the edges of objects on the C10 than there are on the Vizio. Next up is the running peppers test. Where are they running to, you ask? I'm actually not sure. On a full array local dimming TV, this will result in some blooming around the peppers, but on an OLED TV there is the appearance of judder. This can be fixed, however, by setting the motion smoothing on either TV to 2 or 3. Both TVs, however, do pretty well in this 24 frames per second content pull down test. Next, we'll test how window size affects peak brightness output, and both TVs share similar characteristics in this test. They both have lower peak brightness levels as the window grows larger, but the peak brightness of the Vizio was that much higher than the C10 in a smaller window size, as it caused the camera to also clip. Alright, now let's get into the video comparison. Both TVs look great, but they each have their distinct picture characteristics which are made evident by this direct comparison. The C10 has a more contrasty, saturated picture, while the Vizio offers more details in the shadows. Now of course, let's compare them even closer. The scene transitions on the Vizio take slightly longer because it has a higher input latency, at least in movie mode. Colors on both TVs are vivid, though the C10 has a more saturated picture, but they both have that HDR pop. That said, the Vizio does have the more realistic looking colors, especially when it comes to things like skin tone. Both TVs are in their most accurate picture mode, Cinema Home for the C10 and Calibrated for the Vizio. Now both TVs are getting the exact same signal from a Panasonic UB820 Blu-ray player that's then split through a Denon X4700H receiver. So any differences you see is a result of the individual TV's picture processing. Now let's see how the color and contrast performance changes relative to movie mode when we put both TVs in game mode. Once in game mode, the input latency difference between both TVs virtually disappears. There's a noticeable shift in the colors of the C10 where it isn't quite as saturated as it was in the movie mode, but the picture of the Vizio in game mode is pretty indistinguishable from that of the movie mode. So what do you think? I mean, both TVs definitely have their distinct picture characteristics, which I think was made evident by this direct comparison. Now, I think the C10 was going for that saturated, contrasty picture that a lot of people associate with HDR, while the Vizio was going for a more realistic take on it. Granted, the difference in the resulting picture wasn't that extreme, but there was a difference, as you saw. And both TVs were in their most accurate picture mode, Cinema Home for the LG C10 and calibrated for the Vizio. Now, of course, you can refine the picture of both TVs to your liking by adding saturation or contrast, brightness, what have you, but I don't think that would be something suitable to add for this comparison, since we're comparing their most accurate picture modes, not ones that I've changed based on my subjective tastes. Now, the Vizio really surprised me with its peak brightness performance, because there were instances where it got so bright in the highlights that it caused the detail in the camera to clip when I was recording. And the TV handles brightness a bit differently than the LG does, where the LG has a toggle for enabling and disabling tone mapping. The Vizio has a slider where, as you increase it, the peak brightness of the highlights will be increased also, while the black levels will remain the same. While both TVs have a setting to increase the peak luminance, where it will use those white subpixels to actually increase the overall brightness of the picture. Now, I'm not sure if both TVs use the exact same panels from LG Display, but the subpixel layout are extremely similar, so that's to be determined. Now, as far as value is concerned, the Vizio launched their 65-inch OLED at just $2,000, which is below the cost of even the LG B10. But in exchange for that, you give up two of those 4 HDMI 2.1 ports that you'd find on an LG C10 OLED. But that would be okay, because both TVs have Dolby Atmos pass-through, so you could connect both next-gen consoles to each of those HDMI 2.1 ports, which would then send the uncompressed audio signal through your TV to your receiver through the EARC port, which both TVs have. So in essence, you'd be covered if you got the Vizio TV, and you wouldn't have an issue with any next-gen console. Vizio is also the only manufacturer in the US which makes TVs that support all HDR standards, from Dolby Vision to HDR10+. Now, the Vizio still has some issues with the picture, and the company has committed to fixing them in a firmware update, but there is some issues with gaming, for example, which I found out personally. You'll see in the gaming demo and comparison. Vizio has committed to fixing those issues, including the FreeSync issue, in a firmware update in the future. But so far, the dimming issue that I saw in the unboxing and initial impressions video isn't there anymore as of this latest firmware update, as well as support for FreeSync, which is kind of currently broken. So let me know your thoughts about these TVs and the comparison in general in the comments. Now, are you in the market for one? Has this comparison helped you one way or the other? Let me know. And if you want to help support the channel so we can bring you more content like this one, then feel free to use the links in the description to buy the TVs if you're in the market for it. Or you can always visit the merch store and get an awesome home theater t-shirt, or one like this one, the 2020 year in review so far. They're pretty cool. Don't forget to like the video if you liked it, and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching, and until next time, this has been your friend and neighborhood Villaman saying be safe and peace. What are you still doing here? I mean, the video's over. Go with something else. I mean, you can watch one of those videos up there. Go.